Good evening, everyone. You're very welcome to this evening's webinar on club coach planning. My name is Garreth Thornton, and I'll be delivering the webinar this evening. Just so you know, the webinar is being recorded, and you will receive the link for the recording and the slides of the presentation in the next couple of days. Like any webinar, suppose to make it engaging, throughout, if you do have a question, pop it in the chat box. We will look for some sort of engagement at different times throughout the webinar. So there were a lot of questions come in from the registrations, and I have tried to answer the questions throughout the webinar. But if there are questions still outstanding, or there is something that jumps to mind throughout the presentation, feel free to put it in the chat box. We'll try and answer it, and we will leave a couple of minutes at the end to answer any questions. So the outcomes of this evening, I suppose we're going to look at a review process. I suppose before you do any planning, you probably have to look at the review of what you've done previously. So we look at the review process in terms of what is it, how do we do it, and as coaches or as clubs, do we do it? And it broke the planning process down into 3 different sections. So club planning, so as a club, what type of planning are you currently doing when it comes to coaching and games in the club? Coach planning, so as a coach, what type of planning do you do with as a coach and your coaching team? And then the actual session plan, so we'll have a wee look around sort of session planning and what maybe session planning entails, just so we get a flavour as to, I suppose, what age groups you're currently working at. In the chat box here, I'm going to launch a poll. So if you're a child coach that's your coaching between nursery and under 11, a youth coach under 11 to under 17, or an adult coach under 17 or above. Now, if you work across a couple of different of the age groups, that's fine. If you just want to select one of them and put it in the chat box, and it'll just give us a flavour as to the age group, so we can tailor it as we go through. If you are having any issues accessing the poll, if you just want to even write it in the chat box, that's fine. Okay, that's great. So pretty predominantly they're youth coaches, which is grand. Okay, so working from your under 11 through to under 17s. So I suppose a wee bit around the review process. So, the review process it's quite simple. You want to think before we do any sort of planning or pre-planning, we have to go through this process. So it's plan, do, review, be it the season just gone past, the season coming up, the session you done last week, or the session that you planned for tonight. Will we run through this process tomorrow? So we plan the session, we do it, and then we review it. It's something that I would feel very strongly about, and in my own coaching, I would do after every single session. I think it gives you a good gauge as to, if you're on the right track, or if you've maybe done what you've planned to do. Obviously, plans will change throughout a session. We know that, but if the process, if you don't do this process, or it's not something that you're familiar with, it is something that I would encourage you to definitely try and add into your coaching practice. So from a club perspective, I suppose we're in the middle of January now. You would be hopeful that your club has sat down as a group of coaches and went through a review process from 2022. If you haven't, it's maybe an action you can take out of tonight's workshop, and you can go back to the coach in your club and say, look, we need to sit down and we need to do a quick review of what we've done last year. And then as a group of coaches, or as a coaching team, so if you're the under 11 and the under 13 coach in the club, can you pull together the coaches or your management team, and can you go through a review process of last year before starting any planning for this year? So you plan something, you go and do it, and then you go back and review it, and you see how it went, what changes you can make, or how you might do things differently. So a very basic template to use, and this can be done with the other coaches in your club, or it can be done as a group. It can be done with the coaching committee or the coaching officer, or it can be done just with your individual management team. So how did the 2022 season go? Jot down your answers. What went well? So from a coaching and management perspective, and maybe try and leave success out of it, so if you won the under 17 championship, or you won 9 under 11 blitzes, or whatever it may be, that's probably a byproduct of the things that went well. So you're probably looking to maybe drill down a wee bit deeper into what went well from a coaching or management perspective. What could we have done better? So as a management team, what could we have done better? So again, you're looking at the self-reflection part of this. You're digging in a wee bit. Well, things that we didn't do that we could have done better, or things that we did do that we could have done better. What should we continue doing in 2023? So if you're sitting there now and you started with 25 players and you retained all 25 players, well, that's a massive positive. So that you've obviously done something right in 2022 to keep the players coming back. Did you see any development in your players or whatever it may be? These answers, you'll be able to come up with these answers yourselves. But what should we continue doing in 2023? Things that you've done in 2022 you want to keep doing. How maybe could you make it a wee bit better? And then how are we going to improve as a coach and a management team in 2023? So again, could you pick 1 to 3 things and prioritize them and say, right, as a management team this year, we're going to try and get better at doing X, Y, and Z. And then once you identify what you want to get better at, it's a matter then of putting a wee bit of an action in place to try and get that sorted. Okay, so that's really your review process in a nutshell. So there's not a whole pile to it. It's just a matter of sitting down and doing it. So if you could just give a thumbs up in the chat, or a wave or yes, if that is something that you or your club or your coaches have done to date, is a review process. I think we have 193 people on the workshop here, so it'll just give us an idea as to how many people have went through this process. Yeah, so we've the right couple coming in. There's probably a bit of a delay, so we've plenty of ways and some ends. So again, I say, like, if it's not something you've done, it is a very, very simple process to do. It probably is better if it is done formally, but it can be done informally, so it doesn't need to be in the form of a sit-down meeting. You could throw these couple of questions maybe into your WhatsApp group or whatever communication method you use, and gather your information through that. Okay. So on to the planning process. So from a club coaching planning perspective, a club coaching plan is created from within. It will be created by the coaching committee and the coaches, and it must be a shared vision that everyone is working towards. To get real buy-in, all the coaches have to be involved in this. If there's a group of 2 or 3 people decide, now, well, listen, we're going to go and do this, and this is how we're going to do things. How really are you going to get buy-in from everybody? So this should be an open forum initially, where everyone sits down around the table and tries to devise or develop a club coaching plan with everyone's input. Again, so in the chat box again, if you could just give me a thumb up if you think your club have an effective and functioning coaching officer and coaching committee. Now, we will explain in the next slide what an effective and functioning coaching officer and coaching committee looks like. So without a coaching officer and without a coaching committee, how can any real meaningful planning take place? Who's taking the leadership and who's taking the ownership of it? There's probably nobody. So again, another action in this one is, if you're sitting there now and you're thinking, no, we don't have a coaching officer in place and we don't have a coaching committee in place, it's probably something that you should be looking to go back to your club chairman, your club executive, and recommend, look, we need to get a coaching officer in place, and as a byproduct of that, we need to get a coaching committee in place as well. Okay. So we've got sort of varying answers coming through. Some people are saying yes, still more to do, no coaching committee, yes to both. So probably a mix there of yes and no's. Okay. So coaching officer and a coaching committee, how did we develop it, and what does this look like practically, I suppose? So the roles of the coaching officer are down the left here. So it's the role of the coaching officer to chair the coaching committee. It's the role of the coaching officer to oversee the development of a coaching plan or a coaching philosophy within the club, to promote coach education, be it formal coach education courses, so your foundation award or your award 1, award 2, etc., or any informal coach education. So, for example, a webinar like this tonight, or any other coach education workshops that you see are on, that would be a big role for the coaching officer to try and get that message out to the coaches in the club. Can you make them go to it? No, you can't. But at least you can say, well, listen, I've made people aware, and if there's coaches who are really interested in developing themselves, they will probably try and make an effort to attend some of them. Probably as a my own opinion would be that if you can give the coaches in your club attending 2 to 3 coach education workshops per year, that they're probably going to be picking up plenty. Monitor and review the coaching standards in the club. So the role of the coaching officer there is to make sure that there's a review being done, to make sure there's planning being done, to make sure that the coaches are sticking to the plan and carrying out the plan. Liaise with the county games development manager in terms of of games competitions and games programs and blitzes and that sort of stuff, and be a good delegator. A coaching officer in a club isn't going to do all this on their own, so it is key that you do try and bring people with you, and you're able to delegate roles to people within the club. I suppose from the coaching officer, then the coaching officer is going to need a coaching committee. And again, this is just my own opinion, and as what I would say would be best practice within clubs. So the coaching committee is made up of one person from each age group. So if you have a manager, a coach, or a mentor from each age group, from under 7 through to under 17 in the club, doesn't need to be the manager, doesn't need to be the lead coach. It just needs to be somebody from that management team who's prepared to join the coaching committee. Okay. In terms of how often do you meet, so from October to February in the off season, or when maybe you're just having a winter program in the club, you can meet monthly. And those monthly meetings would look at stuff like this, so getting the reviews carried out, getting the plans in place for next year, potentially trying to put in a coach education program in the club over the winter, looking at a winter program for your nursery, so your nursery and your child players. How can you then look to develop your youth players that aren't maybe playing schools football or aren't on academy squads? Are they just left lying idle for 2 to 3 months and not doing anything? Or is there a plan in place in the club to keep them players active? You're appointing coaches and getting all the loose ends tidied up this time of year in your meetings between October and February. Then obviously when the season starts, we're a lot busier, and I suppose meeting on a monthly basis might be a wee bit unrealistic, or meeting formally on a monthly basis might be a bit unrealistic. So regular meetings 3 times a year between March and September, I don't think is an unrealistic target for a coaching committee, and that is just to make sure that everything's going well in the club, and if there is anything needs sorted, that it's getting sorted, that it's not a case of and we've all been there, you meet up at the start of the year, that's the team you're taking, there's your bag of balls. And the next time you hear from anybody from the club is next October when they're coming asking you again, do you want to stay on? I see a question coming in here. With 4 codes, 1 from each team could be 25 people. It is too many, yes. If you could probably combine your men and ladies football together as one, and then combine your camogie and hurling as another, probably an easier way of doing it. Another role of the coaching committee is to assist in designing the coaching plan, the philosophy, and carrying it out. As I said already, to appoint and recruit managers and coaches, and to develop a club school link. So again, does your club have a club school link? Is it effective? What are you getting out of it? Do you have a club coach going into your local primary schools to coach and have a presence there? Probably those months between October and March when we don't have a games program really in our clubs. That's probably the key time that we're getting into our primary schools to make sure that our kids are getting some sort of activity or some sort of coaching throughout them winter months. Okay, probably then just an add-on from the last slide in terms of club planning. So I would have spent a lot of time around different clubs and having different meetings, and a lot of the same feedback comes back, and it generally comes back to these 4 points. So a coaching committee and a coaching officer. So does your club have one in place, and is it effective? Coach development and coach recruiting. So this is something that's probably ongoing in the club. We're always trying to recruit new coaches and new parents, and we're always trying to develop the coaches that we have. So as a club, are you recruiting new coaches and parents, and are you providing learning opportunities for your coaches to develop themselves? Player pathway and player development. So as a club, are you measuring what your players are doing? So for example, are you skills testing your players, probably particularly from your nursery age group right up to under 13s? are your coaches doing the right things at the right time from an athletic, a skills, and a games perspective? And probably the biggest thing is all for our players, are they having fun? And then lastly, a club school link. So do you have one? Is it working? And how are you measuring? So you might be sitting there thinking, oh, we do have a coach who goes into the club or into the school. Sorry, how do you know it's working? Do you as a club, do you have some way of measuring it, or have you a way of finding that out? So, I think if you were to take them 4 points away, have a meeting around them 4 points, and even score your club 1 out of 5 on each of them, and see year on year, can you get that? Can you get up to a 2 out of 5 or a 3 out of 5 or whatever it is in each of them points? And that's something that if you stuck to, and as from a coaching and games perspective, if all clubs were able to really hone in on those things and improve on each of those four areas, I think your club will be in a strong position going forward from a coaching and games perspective. On to coach planning then. I just see a question coming. I'll answer these just as we go along, if that's okay. So how would you measure if your club school link is working? So probably one of the things, if you went to the local primary school and you found out how many kids are in the school or are in each class, and this probably works for a one club, one school model, I suppose. And then it's quite easy to work out then where we've got 60 primary 1 kids, but we've only got 30 coming over to our nursery program. So there's 30 kids there that aren't attending. I suppose obtaining that information from a school is probably easy enough in terms of once you have the link created. It's just a case of asking who, how many kids are here, how many kids are going to the after school coaching, how many kids are we exposed to. In terms of if you're a school and you've got multiple clubs feeding into it, my own opinion in this is, if you're a coach going in, take the kids from the other club. Are you really going to improve them a whole pile by giving them a 40 or 45 minute session per week? I don't really think it's difficult to go into a school and say we're only taking players from club X here or whatever it is, But I think to answer that question, Vince, I suppose is get the numbers, see how the kids coming across. Probably make sure the person into the school is suitably qualified, and that they're providing age appropriate coaching within the school. You could skills test them. You could run a block of 6 or 8 weeks and retest. I have known clubs to, at the end of a 6 or 8 week block, maybe have an inter-schools blitz where they'll maybe have the key stage 2, so the P5, 6 and 7s, and they'll run a 5-a-side or a 7-a-side tournament over on in the club grounds, just as a wee bit of a, I suppose, end of block reward for the kids, and make a bit of a day out of it, and get mummy or daddy over on a Friday afternoon if they can, and make a bit of a day out of it for them, which is, it seems to have gathered good traction in some of the clubs. And we've a new coaching officer, so they try to follow on from the previous officer, try their own thing again, probably very individual, probably very club dependent. Probably the first thing the new coaching officer should be doing is sitting down with all the coaches and carrying out a review and seeing what's been on previously, and seeing what are the good things that have been carried on, or what things that may potentially need to be changed, or potentially could be done differently. And what's your take on recruiting parents? Probably it's key. Unless we don't recruit our parents, where are the future coaches coming from? I think, if you're going to a nursery session or under 7 session, you're probably going to be a parent of a child. It's a difficult enough age group. There's not too many coaches out there who are going to volunteer to go down and take the nursery group or the under 7 or under 8s. It's usually a parent that's involved there. So I think we need them. I think as part of our coaching, as part of our planning, our club planning, it's, do we have a plan in place to try and upskill new parents coming in, and that can be done through your nursery program, when it's maybe a more of a non-threatening environment. So on to coach planning here. So this next slide is all about you as a coach and your own coaching team, and maybe the team above you or the team below you. So coaching team goals and targets. So as a group of coaches, do we sit down at the start of the year and do we have a set of targets or a set of goals as a coaching team we want to stick to, we want to try and hit in that season, and that will differ from an under-7 coach to an under-17 coach. So an under-7 coaches, their main target could be that we've got all the kids coming back every week. An under-17 coach could be that they're going to win an under-17 championship, or a senior coach a senior championship, whatever it may is. How do we do that? We communicate. So I think between coaching teams there has to be a high level of communication, and again, there has to be a lead. The lead person probably needs to be taking charge of that, communicating with everybody else in terms of what their roles and responsibilities are and what the expectations are. Probably looking and I suppose looking at each individual coach you have with you and looking at what their strengths are. So you might have somebody who is really good communicator. So they might be the person to set the tone at the start of training. You might have somebody who's, really eccentric, and that's the person to lift the mood of training. So I think as a coach, you probably need to be looking at the different characteristics that each of the management team you have with you and see, right, well, what can that person's role in this group be? Then you have to sit down and plan, so do you plan for a year? Do you plan for 6 months? Do you plan for a month? Do you plan for a week? Do you plan session by session? Again, totally dependent on each individual. My own opinion would be that you have an overarching plan for loosely for a year as to what you want to achieve and maybe what the end goal looks like, and then work backwards and maybe break it down into smaller chunks. And then my own view on this would be that I would like to plan sort of always 2 or 3 weeks in advance, just so you know what's coming, and the other coaches along with you know what's coming. So, and then back to the communication piece where you're communicating with each other, and again, depending on what level you're working at, is it on a daily basis? Is it every couple of days? Is it pre-training? So I think once there's some element of communication there and you have a plan in place, you should be seeing some sort of continuity. Probably a question, I'm not getting you an answer to this, but in terms of your own plan and your own management team, do you plan? Is there one person that is the lead coach? Are they the only person that plans? Do they then let the other coaches know what the plan is? Do they tell them, stand at the side of the field 5 minutes before training? Do they let them know the day before to give them a wee bit of time to plan? Do you delegate out saying, look, John's along with me here. John, tomorrow night I want you to do a 10-minute shooting activity. Mark, I want you to do 10-minute tackling activity. I'll do 10 minutes on, defending, and then we'll all join up and we'll go into small-sided games. So is that how you plan, or is it the same coach just does the same stuff all the time? If that is the case, my own opinion would be give everybody a role. People giving up their time, everybody should have a role in some element of the coaching. How are we going to develop other coaches if the same person's doing it all the time? And then the review, so again, is the review done formally? Is it done informally? Is it done when you're yelling the balls up after training and you're having a crack with each other? How did the night go? What do you think of that? What do you think of that activity? Didn't really work, didn't explain it well enough. Is it done maybe the next day when you have a wee bit of time to go home and digest the session? 101 different ways it can be done. If you're not reviewing and evaluating your session, it's probably something that you should be looking to start with. Self-reflection then, so from a personal thing and from a group of coaches, do you self-reflect? So I know myself, I go home after the training session, be it that night or the next morning, and I will have a wee think about it. How did the session go? Did I perform well? Was it planned enough? Did I get the message across? Were things clear? I'll ask myself all them questions, and you'll generally know yourself how the session has went. And if you're not happy with some of the session, well, then it's probably up to yourself to look at, well, why did that happen? And then, right, how can I go and fix that? Personal development. So again, probably a hot topic at the minute is the holistic side of things of coaching. So as a coach, when we're planning, do we coach to try and improve the person? It's all, yes, we want to develop players, and you'll hear that better people make better players. But as a coach, are we mindful of the people we're coaching? Are we trying to build a relationship with them and all them types of things? And I think it has to be real and it has to be authentic. And the team huddles at the end are great, and the fist pumps and the high fives and all these things are great if they mean something and they're real. So as a coach, if you're doing it because everyone else does it and it looks good, but you don't really believe in it and it's not authentic, forget about it, because players will see through you. But if it's something that you really believe in and you want to try and develop that relationship with your players, and you want to get to know them and you want to ask them the questions and be genuinely interested in them, I think it's you coming up with ways around that and how you do that. And probably that really critical age of, most of you are saying here, your youth coaches, that 13, 14, 15, 16, be it with boys or girls, when they're going through, different stages in their life, exam pressures and everything that goes with it, you as a coach could potentially be the most important person in that player's life, so, but I think probably the big thing for me is, if you're a coach that wants to go down that route, really, really own it and be really, really authentic about it, and don't be fake about it. If you're going to be fake about it, don't do it. The winning v development then. So whenever you're planning, and we're not going to go into massive detail in this because it's probably a workshop on its own. Winning v development, and when does it start and when did it end, and people's own opinion on it. But as a coach, are we planning for it? So there, at what stage does one crossover? Does one take precedent over the other? Should one take precedent over the other? Again, we're not going to get into it, but it's something you need to be mindful of when you're planning your sessions. How much, or where does the focus lie? Look at the other side of the screen, you'll see development at all costs. So again, it's back to you as a coach. What's your driving factor as a coach? Is it to be the winning coach and win 9 under 11 tournaments and play 13 players and leave the other 6 or 7 along the line? Or are you trying to give people equal game time and develop as many players as you can? So we do hear a lot about the winning at all costs, and we all know the coaches, and we have them in our clubs. But can you plan, or can you have maybe the characteristic of a development at all costs coach? And that developing one player will be totally different to the other player. But unless you plan for that, and you've thought about it, and you maybe spoke to people about it, how does that look for you practically? Above them, we have the knowledge. So when you're planning your sessions, as the lead coach or the manager, do you have the knowledge of what you're trying to deliver? Does your management team or the coaches with you, do they have the knowledge and skill set to be able to deliver out in the sessions? So as a coach, do you know the progressions of the skills? Do you know the regressions of the skills? Do you know how to maybe change up the game, how to make it harder, how to make it easier? Do you have knowledge around player development? So do you know maybe what to be looking at, and what ages to be looking at these things in terms of to develop our players? And if you don't, there's loads of information and resource out there. It's maybe just spent in the next 5 or 6 weeks before you're back out in the grass all the time, just getting up to speed with these sorts of things. Planning for the environment then, so again, we hear a lot in the GAA about the high performing teams and the environment is set and what culture looks like and all that sort of stuff. But as a coach, again, are you planning for that environment? What do you want your environment to look like? Is it positive? Is it fun? Are you allowing your players to be creative? Are you a dictator? No one's allowed to talk. You're the only person that talks. You're not allowed to laugh. So as again as a coach, what type of environment do you want your players coming into, and how as a coach and a coaching team are you planning for that? And then the bottom one then is, would you enjoy that session? So it's still a question I ask myself after every training session I plan. Before I leave the house, so when I do the plan on that day or the night before for the session, would I enjoy that session? So if you can't answer that question yourself, that as a player, I'd actually enjoy that, how are the players going to feel? Now, obviously, when you get into maybe into the older side of youth and into adult, there's going to be elements of training sessions that nobody enjoys when you have the hard work and maybe the bits of dogging sessions that have to happen. Nobody really enjoys that. But I think as a coach, if you can take that bit out and ask yourself the question, would you enjoy that session when you were playing? If the answer is yes, probably 9 times out of 10, you're hoping that the players are going to enjoy it as well. There's a couple of questions here. How often should 7 to 8-year-olds train per week? My own opinion would be probably coming into the better weather from May onwards twice. This time of year, probably once. But when the better weather comes, my own thinking would be one evening during the week, and then once at the weekend on a Saturday or Sunday. As far as a plan for underage might go, in your opinion, is it better to focus on one skill a night, developing it from a drill into a game, or continue working on all the skills each night, but it being more diluted? Again, you probably do have to have a skills focus. It depends what age you're working at, but I think you do have to have a skills focus. Whenever you bring that into the game, I suppose you're bringing in all the skills, which if the ability level of the group depending on what the ability level of the group, it might dilute it, you know. But if you find that your group are struggling on a certain skill and you're not able to transition that into a game and it's not able to be effective, yes, it might be better to work on that in isolation until it improves and then bring it into a game. Hopefully that answers your question. How much time do you let them have a bit of crack before we get down to business of training? We have a fairly chatty bunch. We want to keep a good balance. Very good question. I suppose if as a coach, one of my things, I think sessions has to be enjoyable. It has to be enjoyable for the coach too. There has to be a wee bit of crack. But I think if you're able to draw a line with the players, you know, look, you've had your bit of crack now, we're going to do a bit of work here for 10 minutes or whatever it is. You know, whenever you're having your recovery, whenever you're having your rest, you're setting up an activity where there is a wee bit of fun or enjoyment through it, and then you're getting back into the serious stuff. If you are struggling with them, ask them. Again, I don't know what, I think it's Gillian there. I'm not too sure, Gillian, what age you're talking about, but can you ask them the question? You know, right players or boys and girls, you know, you involve them in it and see, can they come back with an answer for you in terms of, right, we've had enough now, or, you know, that type of thing that may work if you are struggling with it. There are templates for skills testing that I can send out to people at the end. Yes. Can you share an example of your year planner? It's probably written on an A4 sheet folded up somewhere, but it's nothing highfalutin. It's more just probably what the aims and goals would be for the rest of the year in terms of, you know, and we'll get to actually that. So I don't know if it's Brian, we'll get to that as we go through this, Brian. It might answer your question there. So hopefully there's no question that, hopefully some of that makes sense to you, and there are a couple of takeaways in terms of coach planning and maybe management team planning. So probably a question that, as a coach, again, depending on whatever age you work at, what do you want your players to look like from a skills, games, and athletic development perspective? You know, so probably with most age groups we have for a minimum of 2 years. So if you're under 7 coach, you're probably going to be with that group for a minimum of 2 years. So if you ask yourself your question, what do you want your players to look like from a skills perspective when they leave us in 2 years, from a games perspective when they leave us in 2 years, and an athletic development perspective when they leave us in 2 years, and then you work back from that. You know, so right, we've 2 years to get all our under 7s competent in punt passing with both feet, competent in doing the body catch and the high catch, competent in doing the pickup, or whatever the skills may be. You'll know your own age group, you'll know the level, so you're then able to determine where they can go to. I suppose the pictures just illustrate there, you know, a wee nursery session up till, I think it's maybe under 15 or under 16s representing Ulster in the hurling academy, up then to Michael Murphy, who's an elite performer for years at county and at county level. So, you know, obviously our aim is to try and get our players to Michael Murphy standard. It's never going to be, we're not going to get there with everybody. But I think as a coach, if you have in your head, or a coaching team, what you want their players to look like from those 3 perspectives, skills, games, and athletic development, and then you use that as your end goal. So that could be the end of your plan, Brian. And then from that, how do you break that down into, well, in year 1 we need to cover X, Y, and Z, and in year 2 we need to do X, Y, and Z, or whatever it may be. Okay. Just a quick sort of and again, this is just my opinion on player milestones here. So, you know, under 6, under 7, all the skills there. Can you as a coach expose your players throughout the whole season, or throughout the 2 years you have them, to all of them skills? Can you have a skills testing template or a checklist where you're able to see, right, well, can all our players do these different skills? That then progresses on into your under 8, under 9, 10, 11, and then under 12, under 13 upwards. You're probably hoping that the players have grasped most of the skills, and it's just probably trying to refine them then, you know. So as a coach, you know, do you know the progressions and regressions, as we've already talked about here? So for example, you know, you've a young lad at 7 years of age and he's struggling with the punt kick. you know, and you're giving him all the coaching points, and you're looking at his body position, you're looking at his balance, and you're checking where his head is, and you're checking where his hands are, and you're checking where his feet are. And maybe he just hasn't developed the hand-eye coordination yet, or the foot-eye coordination to perform the skill. You know, as a coach, do you know, right, we can regress that skill for him, so he's still achieving success, and we let him bounce the ball and do a punt kick. If he still can't do that, do you know, as a coach, will you can put the ball on the cone, let him kick the ball off the cone, but you're still trying to encourage him, still trying to encourage the hard foot, the toe down, head down, toe down type of technique. So, you know, it's as a coach and as a group of coaches, familiarizing yourselves with how to build the skill up and how to break the skill down to be able to try and reach some of these milestones. So again, this could be a document you take away with the coaches in your club and delete all the stuff out of it and say, right, well, what do we want our under sevens in our club be able to do by the time they leave us in 2 years? Your under 9 coaches do the same, and then can you, as a group of under 7, under 9 coaches, sit down, have a conversation, say, right, we need to be trying to do this type of stuff, or we need to be trying to develop these type of things in our sessions, that there's some sort of continuity, or there's some sort of pathway going through the club. Same then for the 9s and 11s, same then for 11s and 13s, and same then for the 13s and 15s. You know, so, you know, people talk about such and such a club as a great development, or a great development pathway in their club. You know, it could be something as simple as sitting down with each other, having a conversation around this sort of stuff, and developing something up among themselves. Okay, so then on to session planning. So we've looked a wee bit about club planning, we've looked a wee bit about planning as a coach. Now we're on to session. So why do we plan? So our session, our week, and our month has a structure. So it's not just ad hoc. We're not just turning up and having a yarn at the side of the field saying, well, lads, go and run a couple of laps there, and try go and set up this, and you go and set up that one we've done, and you're doing the same shooting activity that you've done for the last 6 weeks, and you're wondering why your players are bored and your players are messing about on you because you're not challenging them and they're not engaged. When we do plan, you know, generally, if you do plan, you will know this. You have a better flow. There's an easier transition between games and activities if everything's set up. There's less time wasted. So if you think you've 2 sessions a week with your team and you have 1 game, you have them for an hour's training session on a Monday, an hour on a Wednesday. By the time they arrive, you get a warm up done. You stop for your water breaks. You do a wee bit of feedback, a wee bit of question. You're cooled down. That session might only last 30, 35, 38 minutes. You know, so break that down into your Monday night session, and your Wednesday night session. Some of your players will only have a ball in their hand for an hour and 10 minutes. So it's not a long time. So the time you have with your team is key, that you utilize it as best you can. Another reason to plan is progression from session to session. So what worked and what didn't work, so that you're able to document, right, well, we've played that game, how do we make that game harder for them? Well, the last time we played that game was a 3-on-3. We're now up to an overload of 5v3, and the 3 defenders are doing really, really well again. The 5 forwards, or whatever it may be, right, they're now ready for a 6v3, or whatever it may be. That is just an example. Plan so everyone is a road, so involve everybody, involve all of the coaches. It increases the communication between the management teams. The plan can and will change. So back to your review, plan do during a session. You know, we've all been there. We've this great session plan. You have it in the hip pocket. You turn up to training. You plan for 22 players. You're going to work in kickouts, and all of a sudden your goalkeeper's not there, and you've only got maybe 15 or 16 players. What do? You know, so as a coach, we have to be creative. We have to be able to adapt. You know, so it's just something that be mindful. And if the plan does change, which it will, don't panic about it. And then evaluate and reflect. So again, as a coach, we touched on it a wee bit briefly earlier on. Do you do it? So do we evaluate our sessions, and then do we do a wee bit of self-reflection on ourselves and with the other coaches? As coaches, we're brilliant at giving players feedback. We're brilliant at evaluating them. We're brilliant about being critical towards them. But as a coach, you know, are we good at evaluating ourselves? Are we good at being critical about ourselves? I know I would have no issues asking a player, how did that session go? What do you think of that? Is there something I could do different? You know, I would ask other members of the management team I've worked with, give me a wee bit of feedback on the last month. Give me something that I could do different, or something you didn't like that I said, or something you didn't like that I done. So I think there are ways of really, really learning. There are powerful ways of learning as a coach. You probably have to be open-minded and honest, and take it on the chin if you don't like what you hear, but I think it's definitely one way of improving yourself. So considerations when you're session planning. So duration of the session, 45 minutes to 90 minutes approximately. Your nursery sessions, you're probably doing well to get 45 or 50 minutes out of them. Again, as you work up through, my own opinion is, I suppose, an hour after the warm-up. I generally don't count the warm-up. At nursery session I would, anywhere up I wouldn't. So an hour after the warm-up. Number of players and coaches, so probably, it is key that roughly how many people is going to be there and what coaches you have that can assist. The stage of the year, so probably more important at youth into adult. So is it off season, pre-season, mid-season, or peak season, or championship time? So when you're planning your session, you need to take that into consideration in terms of what time of the year it is, and maybe what type of stuff you're doing, and maybe what the focus and what the intensity level is like. Theme or purpose of the session. So every session we do should have a theme or should have a purpose. So what's the session, why you do it, how are you going to do it? Coaching language, which I think is absolutely key. What type of language and I don't mean foul language or bad language. What language are you using? Age appropriate language to your player. So if you're talking with a 6-year-old, are you saying, listen, you should have made that support run at that angle? Totally over their head. So what type of language are we using with our players? Also goes back to then what type of language you're using with your management team. So there's no point me taking the defenders away and talking to the defenders about how I want them to tackle or how I want them to defend as a unit, and then they're going to another coach or mentor the next night and they're giving them a totally different message. So as a management team, I think you have to have your coaching language nailed down. Probably that underage, I think if you're able to come up with a couple of key coaching points that, listen, when we're talking about the pump pass, this is the language we want to use, so that you're drilling it into the player's head. Training load prior to the session, and what does the next week look like? So again, probably youth into adult. If you've got players there who are playing at schools, so it's this time of year, McCrory Cup, and it's maybe not affect maybe clubs, too many clubs at the minute, but whenever the season kicks off, you need to be knowing what your players are doing either side of your trainings, or if they're involved with other sports. Age appropriate games and activities, so they're not too easy or not too hard. How you challenging them? Quality of equipment, so have you got the necessary equipment to deliver a good session? And then the basic consideration that we should, what's the weather like? The safety element, the facilities you have, is it indoor, outdoors, the size of the playing area? But again, these are all things that as a coach that hopefully we can adapt to if the things do crop up with us. All right, so a session structure. So what does this look like? So what's your focus and theme? So again, when I plan a session, I plan a session on an A4 piece of paper, and I'll write along the top, whatever team it is, the date, and sort of what our focus or what our theme is for that night. Must have a warm-up. Is your session, is it a station-based session? Is it a skill-based session, a game-based session, a tactical gameplay session, or is it a mix of all? So your station-based session is there, your nursery group or your under-7s or whatever, you'll probably work on them in stations, be it skill-based stations or game-based stations, for a large proportion of the year is probably the way to go. Anything after that then, is how does it look? Is it, are you doing your warm-up? Are you straight into skills? Are you doing your warm-up? Are you into a game and then into skills and back into a game? So again, it's just to have you thinking as to how your session might look. Is there an element of conditioning in your session? Be it your aerobic stuff or your speed stuff. Where does that fit into the session? And then a cool down. Probably a couple of questions then. So throughout your session, were there opportunities for full engagement? So did everybody have an opportunity to be involved in the session? So if you do have your kids that are sitting out, what can you do as a coach to bring them back and get them involved? Was there progression or development in the session? So are you running the same kick passing activity for 6 to 8 minutes and you're not changing it up? And then you're wondering why the intensity's gone down, why there's no buzz about the session, there's a poor atmosphere, and then the level of the activity goes down. It's probably because of the board. So I would always sort of try to work off 2 or 3 minutes. If I'm doing a kicking activity, I do it for 2 or 3 minutes. It either needs progressed on, or it needs changed, or there needs something added into it, or you're bringing them in for a wee bit of questioning, or or something along those lines. So I think trying to keep things shorter and sharper might help you in terms of keeping engagement. Is there creativity in the session? So are we taking the creativity out of our players? So you look at the Cliffords at the weekend there, were they stifled by not being allowed to do X or not to do way of training, or were they told, listen, you get the ball and you can try this or try that? So as coaches, what can we do to allow that wee bit of creativity in our players? If you see a player kicking the ball with the outside of their foot, and I'm probably guilty of it myself, would we give off to them? Would you do that in the game? You see a player kick with their weak foot from 25 yards in a training game or a training activity, and they kick the ball away, you're probably saying to them, get onto your strong foot. But there just might be that one chance in a game where that player's through and they're on their weak side and they take a stab at it and they nail it and they put it over the bar. And it's probably because you've allowed that in training. So I do know from probably a wee bit of self-reflection on myself, it's something I need to improve going forward, is allowing players that wee bit more room and opportunity for creativity throughout the sessions. Were there opportunities for decision making? So are you playing games that encourage your own players to make decisions, or are you making decisions for them all the time? Unless you have put your players in that scenario or in that environment in training time and time again, and you're landing to make decisions, then you're questioning about them, you're checking for understanding, you're making sure the new way they made the decision, or you're trying to probe them to see could they've made a different decision or a better decision. Unless you're putting them in that environment, when they go out onto the pitch, don't roar and shout at them and give off to them for making a bad decision, unless you've allowed them the opportunity to do it in training. So I think it's key. There should be decision making in every single thing you do during training. You can have decision making in your warm-up. And then is there opportunities for Q&A and feedback? So again, one of the first things I'll do after every activity during a session, bring group players in, they'll say, talk to me, how'd that go? So are you asking the players for their feedback? You might think it's a wee bit daunting at times, but I don't want to give ownership, or I don't want to give too much power here to the players. But I think unless you're able to gather that information back to them, do they understand what they're doing? Why have they done it? Etc. Etc. And you'll see here the powerful questions: why, how, and what. Why did you make that run? What did you do to give that ball? Where did you move to after you passed it? If it's a simple yes or no question, is there any real learning takes place? But the why, how, and the what, and that goes back to your plan. Can you plan the type of questions that you're going to be trying to get across to your players throughout the session? So your session structure shows your warm up. Again, this is all just my own opinion. 12 to 15 minutes. Make sure there's an element of fun. And back to that question, maybe someone, can you get a wee bit of fun, a wee bit of crack throughout the warm up? And have your wee bit of joking and your wee sort of fun games and that, and let people get rid of the energy and that sort of stuff there and through the warm up. Again, probably good practice from your youth players up, foam rolling activities, prehab stuff, your activation. You need a pulse rate, you need some element of mobility and flexibility. Again, you hear all the stuff, the whole warm-up should be done with the ball. I think at underage, yes. I think the higher you go up, and you're working with maybe, again, just opinion, youth and adult, I don't fully believe that every part of the warm has to be done with the ball. I think there is an element when you're doing your mobility and flexibility stuff that if the ball's involved, the focus may be off the actual movement that you're trying to do. So I think sometimes just getting rid of the ball for the 4 or 5 minutes to get that stuff done can be more beneficial. All your multi-directional game movements, any sort of movement that you make in a game should be incorporated into your warm-up. Any accelerating and decelerating, you're starting and stopping, jumping and landing, so how can you incorporate or sneak them movements into your warm-up? There has to be some element of skill development activities, so you need to be trying to practice all the core skills of the game, and then a game to incorporate the game-related movements, so be it a small-sided 5v5, 3v3, 7v7 possession game, whatever it is, there has to be some element of that throughout your warm-up. And then the main body of your session. So is it a traditional session where we have our warm-up, Well, we have our skill development activities, our drills. You know, you do a bank of drills, a kicking drill, a shooting drill, a tackling drill. You then go into a modified, a conditioned game, and then you finish with a full game and you send them home. Okay, nothing wrong with that session whatsoever. Are there other ways you can do it? Can you look at potentially a game-based session? So you have your warm-up, you have a game straight in. You know, have your warm-up, pick 2 teams, throw a ball in. Reds have to get the ball over to those cones. Yellows have to get the balls over to those cones. And then you're stopping the game. You're questioning potentially why are certain things done. Can you challenge players through questioning in that environment? Can you then set a new target or a new task within that game, something that's going to form the rest of your session? So if your session that night is based around retention of the ball, can that first game be about ball retention, or can you add a condition in that is about ball retention? So then you're into your, you know, and these are all just examples, you know, a small-sided game, an overload game, a scenario-based game. At what stage then are you stopping to ask the questions or to try and create some sort of discussion for learning? There has to be an element for skill development practice or drills if required. You know, so if you find that the thing's breaking down, it's not going well at all, the kick passing is terrible, it may need just a bit of a 2 or 3 minute kick passing activity to refocus the mind, potentially get a wee bit of recovery, get a kick pass in again, set a challenge, and get back into a game to see can it be improved. And then as a coach, so it's the considerations we need to take into the things we need to take into consideration. What approach do we use? So probably depending on what age group you're working with, depending on what time of the season it is, or what you're looking to get out of the session. When do you use it? Do you use it every night? Why do you use it? So as a coach, you probably have to be clear in your head, well, why are we only working on a games-based session night? Why are we going to do why are we going to spend 45 minutes on scenario-based coaching? Is it because we're playing a team on Sunday that's going to play with 13 men behind the ball, or whatever it may be? And then how long do you spend on each of the activities? You know, so again, you know your own group, you know how long you can spend in each of these activities, or do you use your coach's eye whenever the intensity stops to drop, or you maybe find that they're not as engaged? Is that the time for you to step in and say, right, but I'm going to change things up here, or I'm going to maybe change my approach, or I'm going to throw in maybe a wee sharp hand passing drill, you know? Or do you have that sort of go-to activity where if your session is getting away from you, you set up a wee star hand pass drill or whatever it is, you have a good shooting drill that the players know and you know can be set up, and you throw that into the session to bring the session back, or to try and get engagement again, and try and get the tempo of the session lifted, and then you go back into the main body of your session, or what you were delivering prior to that. There are a couple of questions here. Let's see. For under 15 boys, should we do a 6-week session plan, or is 2 or 3 week plan better, as you mentioned earlier? Again, look, it's coach specific. I don't think maybe planning 6 weeks in ahead, you know, you don't maybe know, you maybe have what you want to achieve in the next 6 weeks, and then maybe break it down into a 2 or 3 week plan. It might be better, or might be more effective for you. But I said that could change. You know, if you're in season, it's probably very hard to plan week on week. You know, if you've played an under 11 match on a Tuesday night and you've conceded 6-18, you'd be hoping your next training session you're working on tackling and defending or something, you know. So you probably need to be looking at each game, especially in season, and maybe working your next training session to suit. Decision making, would you encourage stopping mid-session to explain what options they had? Most definitely. I think that's probably where real coaching takes place, is when you can get in and provide a couple of coach interventions. The only thing I would change there, Paul, I probably wouldn't explain what options they had. I'd ask the question what options they had. You know, so you've kicked the ball in and there's a sweeper back and you've kicked it into a 3v1, but you've 2 men running. I'd probably be asking you, Paul, what would you do different? And you say, well, I'd give the ball to the runner. Why would you give the ball to the runner? Because, well, they had a 3v1 inside and I kicked it straight back to them. That's probably you using questioning instead of you coming in and saying, you know, as a coach, you shouldn't kick the ball in. There was 3 men inside. There was 2 men running off your shoulder. You didn't lift your head. You know, you probably need to be trying to and listen, you that might be the approach you take. It's just the way you've typed it. But I think I think the answer is yes, definitely. We need to stop we need to question. I think that's when real learning and real coaching takes place. Right, suppose we're done there. That's us through a couple more things there. I have a wee feedback link for you to fill in if you just take the time. Suppose the next steps, there's any club that are looking assistance in developing coaching games in their club, feel free to contact me. We have myself and other staff who are available to go out to the club and assist you with overall club planning, and then any other maybe workshops or things like that can help or assist with developing coaching games within the club. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I have sent a link into the chat box there, so if you could just take a minute or two, and yes, I will send out the skills testing with the recording of this workshop. So I've sent a wee link into the chat there. It's a wee Google Forms. It'll take you less than 60 seconds to complete. It's just a wee bit of feedback on this evening's workshop. So if there's a couple of other resources here. So just learningga.ie, probably a very underused resource. You can plan everything, all your sessions through it. Ulster GAA YouTube has a list of webinars, has lots of resources on it. The Dublin GAA website again is very good for that sort of stuff, for gathering up information. And then different guys that I would follow on Twitter there. Some of them you may already follow, guys that would throw out good information. They're not always throwing out games and activities and drills, but they're throwing out things that'll get you think. That would get you thinking maybe a wee bit differently and stuff. Cormac, I'm not too sure. Could you add these links to the chat? Is it this slide that's up here, the resource link you're talking about, or I'm not too sure. Guys, I will send this presentation out with the recording, so you'll get this in the next couple of days, just when it's edited and stuff. I'll send the link. I'll send the presentation that we've just gone through, and I'll also send the skills testing template as well. So look, if we've no more questions, we'll call it today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hopefully you pick something up that you can take away and take back to the club, or take back to your own coaching practice. So thank you very much.